Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
IVM Likes is an IVM production, and if you enjoy listening to our pop culture discussion, you should check out our brand new show, Bollywood Scene Stealers. Hosted by journalist Indu Mirani, who sits down to chat with Bollywood's most famous character actors like Ranveer Shori, Satish Kaushik, Gulshan Grover and more. Episodes are out every Monday. Check it out. If you're a listener of IVM Likes and a socks fan, which I'm sure is a Venn diagram that's totally possible, I have great news for you. You check out the Moja Club. They make amazing funky socks that you can buy on their website, or even better, just get a subscription. Sign up for 6 months or a year and you'll get a pair delivered to your house every month. They'll even throw in a free pair at the end of the month. And if you go to their website, themojaclub.in right now, you get a whole 33% off by just applying the code IVM Likes. It's IVM Likes with no spaces. 33% off. Did you hear that? Themojaclub.in. Hello and welcome to another episode of IVM Likes. Today I'm in the studio with Navin and Abbas. Say hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm rather excited today.
Yeah, that's nice, dude. That's nice.
Yes.
Today we're going to sit around and do what we do usually, just talk about pop culture stuff that we enjoy and sometimes we really hate.
Indeed.
So first up, we're going to do a round of recommendations. Abbas is going to recommend a movie. Naveen's going to recommend a book. I'm going to recommend a podcast. So who wants to start?
I'll go first.
All right, go. Your turn.
All right, so the book I'm recommending today is called Sex and the Citadel. All right, it's written by Shireen El Feki. She's an Egyptian author who now lives in America. But the essential guideline of the book is if you want to learn about the people of any country, you have to first look into their bedrooms, right? Okay. So they look at sex from the perspective of Egyptians and how it was once the coolest thing. It was much more evolved and open in that regard, like how it was in India also, right? The Kama Sutra was written when we were not even born. So everything was much easier in the older times, and now because of a lot of archaic laws being put into practice and mindset changing, how it is today and how homosexuality is looked at in Egypt, how women are treated in Egypt, because everything boils down to sex, right? How they feel about anal sex, how they feel about orgasms and everything. So it's a very in-depth look at how sexual behavior is perceived in Egypt, and it's got very insightful look into
But it's looking at current state.
Yeah, the current
how
state.
It's evolved over time.
Yeah,
and actually become worse, I'm assuming.
Yeah, but they also take a look at what was in the past, and they look at some people who are trying to be renegades in that regard. They talk about this woman who's trying to tell people about being more powerful. For example, women can be on top, and that they don't look at a good thing. So a lot of people are kind of praying for her blood, but then she's also telling she's a very hardcore Islamic person. She's I believe in Allah and everything,
right,
but this is what my thoughts are. So this clash of thoughts and everything. So it's very intense. Joshua gave me this book. It's his book actually, and Joshua will be there in the second part of this episode.
Yes.
So I think it's good to always look at sex from a very stronger perspective than just it's upar say.
Yeah.
So she talks to people who are going to get married soon, people who are actually spending crores and crores of rupees just to get hooked. But for them it's all about this one encounter, how Egyptian men are now dealing with infertility and what are the causes and everything. So it's pretty nice to kind of get that kind of idea.
And all of it is culturally based. How it changed for the people who are right now getting married or thinking about this in a very different way from
so the trickle down effect of it altogether.
Oh wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's very fat also, but it's a good read altogether.
So is this only people of Egypt who are examined, as in who are
the entire Arab world in general, because Egypt is epicenter of it all, but they look at Arab culture and how it was because obviously it changed. The dynamics of the geography of Egypt also has evolved over so much time. So they look into it in terms of she interviews people. She goes to people who are selling all these medicines. Some people who are selling ointments to give you a better boner and all that. And people are buying it desperately and all that. So it's a good way to understand how the Arab world kind of screwed themselves in the bargain of trying to be very
themselves, nice.
in the whole process. So I think it's not for everybody. That book can be a little. It took me also 3 months to actually finish the whole thing.
Okay.
But now that I finished it, I'm actually really happy that I read that book.
Do you mean because it's super open about stuff, or because
it's heavy in terms of also taking in information? It can be a little heavy, in terms of, but then when you finish it, you'll realize why it's important to have this conversation. And it's a context that can be explored beyond the Arab world.
Arab world, of course. Of course, it applies internationally.
Did it change your outlook or opinion about how you see people in the Middle East?
Before
and after.
Definitely, because see, I was looking at the homosexuality angle a lot, and it was how chill they were before and how it was okay, and now it is so rigorous and like how it's kind of become, and that's what like it's not the subculture or the geography that caused it, because people became like that over time and became like a big deal. So I think that is what we should examine always in a conversation.
I also feel like most of the time I always think that if there could be a time and moment you could just trace this back to, where suddenly everybody went the other, like the switch turned and everybody turns the other way, but it never is. Because it's so many changing factors, politically, culturally,
it's a very slow
economics. You never know what changes. That's very interesting.
So politics, religious aspects, everything they cover from every angle.
And what's the earliest time period that she starts?
She goes all the way back to like Muhammad's time, dude. Like she talks about how Prophet Muhammad was like, if a guy is looking at a girl in the wrong way, then he asks the guy to turn his head, not the girl to cover her face.
Right.
And how today is like you have to cover it. So that kind of
Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Sex and the Citadel.
Yes, by Shireen El-Feki.
Awesome.
All right,
Abbas.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to recommend a film very different from Sex and the Citadel. It's called American Splendor. It's from 2003. It stars Paul Giamatti.
Nice.
The film is based on the life of a cartoonist called Harvey Pekar, who wrote a series of comic strips from 1976 to 2008 called American Splendor.
Oh, okay.
So it's part biographical, part adaptation of his comic strips. And why I love this film is like, so we all know how in the Marvel movies, like Stan Lee makes an appearance. So generally it's a custom that whoever the creator of an adaptation, they make like a cameo appearance somewhere. So in this film, Paul Giamatti plays Harvey Pekar, but the real Harvey Pekar is also in the movie, playing himself.
Oh, okay.
And from time to time, he comes, he breaks the fourth wall, comes, kind of comments on how Paul Giamatti just played a scene that might have happened in his real life.
That's hilarious.
And sort of moves on. And from time to time, his wife and daughter also appear because they are also characters in the film. So it's a very, like, it all melds from comic strip to film to fiction to real life. There's this seamless transition happening.
It would be so weird to have somebody play out the moments of your life
and
watch it.
Yeah.
That's...
So there's one particular scene. So Harvey Pekar, the crux of the entire movie is, unlike other biographies or autobiographical films of creative people, where they kind of sweet saccharine films, this is not. It basically goes down to the point where how torturous an artist's life can be, especially one who was making an indie comic which was not for the masses. He never made money out of his comic strip, and just how torturous it became for him to keep this going. So it's a hard film to watch. I mean, he had battles with depression and drugs and alcohol and all of that, and his marriage was also in deep trouble at one point. So all through his life, he kept his day job as a clerk. So in the movie, there is this one scene where it's a retirement party for Harvey Pekar, and it's actually the retirement party that took place in his office, and they filmed it, and they got Paul Giamatti in. So again, it's this one seamless transition of a scene where it's the real life, real people he worked with, and it's amazing to watch. Harvey Pekar in real life also is a very cynical, pessimist guy.
Got it.
So the tone of the film is also like that. Like at the end of this film, it's not one of those where you will feel like so inspired that you want to make art, but actually be prepared that if you're going to make art for a living, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be...
It's a warning film. It's
an
inspiring film.
Yeah. And at some point in Harvey Pekar's life, he was also diagnosed with cancer. So it's also about his battle with cancer, and also again how...
Sounds damn depressing.
That's the thing, right? It sounds very depressing, but if you actually see the film, it's about how, despite all of this, he stood his ground.
Right.
But it's not romanticized.
Correct. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. I get it. It's not like, he was still following his dream, even though he had a day job. He would go home and then work on his art and cartoons. It was just... It's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. So, also a little bit of the movie deals about how he became, at one point of time, he became a regular guest on the David Letterman show because Letterman liked having him. And on one particular appearance, he came and he just went berserk asking people, "What do you want? Why are you watching this?" And this clip is on YouTube.
Oh, very Aaron Sorkin, dude.
Yeah, this actual clip is on YouTube, but they play a fictionalized version of it in the movie.
TV meltdown.
Yeah, so Paul Giamatti is given an extraordinary performance.
So Letterman is playing himself again, obviously.
So Letterman in the movie is not shown.
Okay.
But they use stock footage, whatever they could for the previous.
From the recording itself.
So like Man on the Moon, have you watched that? Like there's a scene where Andy Kaufman had gone to Letterman.
Right.
And then they recreated an entire scene with Jim Carrey. And it's very beautiful. And Jerry the King Lawler is also there.
Yeah, that clip is actually quite insane. But yeah, American Splendor, great performance by Paul Giamatti.
Paul Giamatti's there in that as well, Man on the Moon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. So, American Splendor is my recommendation for a movie.
Awesome.
Check it out.
Thanks, Oz. Okay, I'm going to recommend a podcast today. So, this is a podcast I've been listening to for the last year and is now on a break and is coming out with a new season on May 29th. So, in a couple of weeks, I'm really excited about it. It's a English podcast and a British podcast called My Dad Wrote a Porno.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard it. It is
I've heard
spectacular.
about it.
So basically the story goes that there's this guy, Jamie Norton, and he found out once that his dad wrote, self-published actually, an erotica called Belinda Blinks.
Okay.
His dad goes by the pseudonym Rocky Flintstone in these books. So he decided that, if I know this information, I have this information now that my dad wrote an erotic novel. What am I going to do with it? So he decided that, I'm going to read every chapter with my friends and let them just rip this to shreds. That's fine. So he, every episode is basically a chapter he's reading out to his friends, Alice Levine and James Cooper. And it's literally like him, the awkwardness of what he's reading and that the fact that his dad wrote it and his friends are just like losing it. They're completely ripping him apart. They're like, this is your father. This is your father. Can you imagine he wrote this? Fortunately, I guess, Belinda Blink is the most unerotic novel of all time. It falls in the category of sex and business.
Oh, okay.
She works in the pots and pans industry and her way
So
to the top
sexy.
is to literally sleep with everybody. Gender doesn't matter, nothing matters. So and it's always like, she's flying to Italy for a meeting, like in the pots and pans industry, and just like going to like fancy ass meetings and then sleeping with everybody. And Belinda is one of the most non-interesting person I have ever heard of as a character, because literally every time a guy does something like makes a pass at her or like takes off his shirt and shows her his penis, she blinks. Belinda blinks. And what's really bad is that Rocky Flintstone's idea of what erotica is so messed up, because there are multiple places where he'll describe the girl's boobs like as pomegranates or her vaginal lids popped, and there's no such thing as vaginal lids.
I wouldn't know.
She broke her ankle because she slipped in a pool of semen. I'm like, that doesn't happen. Because it's so awkward and it's kind of cringeworthy, it's just spectacularly funny. It's like if you were reading really horrible comedy with your friends and they would make fun of it. It's that. But so earlier they were doing one episode a week, and people were like getting,
hooked.
Get us some more Belinda Blinks. So they started doing footnotes every other week, which is basically they had a lot of celebrities who listen to the show come on and talk about who I imagined this as. Who my favorite character, like Thomas Middleditch is on it. Michael Sheen comes on. Thomas Middleditch has like voices that he's imagined for all of this cast. Like, the guy with the micro penis, I'm sure he sounds this way. It's insane. And they record in each other's house. They don't even record in the studio because they wanted to feel like I'm hanging with my friends and I'm doing something funny. So they'll hang in like one of their houses and eat a meal, and then obviously I'm definitely assuming some alcohol, and then that's when they start reading.
So how long is the erotica?
20 minutes, one chapter a day, a week.
But then the published stuff that he had.
Oh, it's I think the first book was about 15 chapters. Then he has second book called Belinda Blink 2. And
Why she blinks then next time?
Belinda blinks again.
And then blinks again. And then there's a third version that he's written that's coming out now.
Okay. So still writing.
He's still writing and publishing. He thinks it's doing spectacularly well because people are now going to Amazon because the podcast is buying it. So he's very happy. He does know, of course, that his son is doing it. And he thinks that this is great. He thinks the fans are legit fans instead of ironic fans of
In the typical dad way, he thinks his son is actually promoting his book.
It's quite sweet, guys.
But all these pots and pans are non-stick.
They are mostly non-stick. Okay. Sometimes she gets really big orders, but she's not sure how she'll fulfill it and if they have the resources. So instead, she just sleeps with him, because makes sense.
Yeah.
And some of the descriptions are just like, you have to listen to it. It is so funny. I have laughed like all through cab rides and just like at weird erotic stuff in your ear, and it's just not erotic at all. It's just really funny. It's called My Dad Wrote a Porno. Season 3 is out May 29th, so you can catch up, guys.
So all podcast apps will have these? Or?
Yes, it's available everywhere. I'm assuming there's going to be a language filter on iTunes to find it, because it is while not really adult themed. I mean, not adult themed at least. But yeah, and every episode is only some 20 minutes because a chapter.
Right.
There's a legit chapter where she just gets into a car and then gets off the car and that's it. But it's described because, Rocky thinks he's a great writer.
Yeah.
He just feels like this is how I'm setting the scene. So it's quite fun. You guys should definitely listen to it and catch up before the season comes out. It's quite fun.
Cool. Two more cab rides. Awkward cab rides. Rather.
Alright, so Naveen, you recommended Sex and the Citadel.
Yes, by Shireen El-Feki.
Awesome. And Abbas.
I feel left out because both of you gave really erotic recommendations and my recommendation was this torturous art guy.
I think it's a representation of our sex lives.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Mine's just funny.
Yeah.
His is really educational and cultural.
And yours is depressing.
My
movie was called American Splendor.
Yeah, and I'm recommending My Dad Wrote a Porno on the podcast. Alright, in the next segment, which is a brand new segment we have, guys.
Yes.
It's called...
IVM Fights.
Oh, I was going to call it Best Of, but I like IVM Fights. Let's go with
just
that.
Just came up with that.
Alright, let's get to it after this short break.
What's the best new restaurant in town?
Which bar sucked? What's the worst new Hindi film? What's the most obscure thing to do on the weekend?
And what's the most interesting new walking tour?
If you want to know how to make the most of Bombay, listen to the Podcast by thedailypow.com. We are Pronuti,
Amit,
and Purva.
We're your guide to what to do, see, and eat in the city. You can find new episodes of the podcast every Monday on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you prefer and on thedailypow.com.
Alright, welcome to our new section, IVM Fights. So today we have Naveen and Josh, and the topic is Lord of the Rings books versus movies.
That's right.
Naveen is arguing in favor of the movies, and Josh is going the book side.
Yes.
So let's start opening arguments. Josh first.
Okay. So first thing has to be said that most people's intro to Lord of the Rings that I know was the first film. Most people saw the first film and then ran to get the book and read the second and third book. And that was exactly my experience as well. So when I picked up the book, when I first started reading it, it was such a different experience. But you still had those kind of character shapes in your head of what was cast in the film. But it kind of, over reading the book, those kind of things transformed because you're introduced to new things. You were introduced to Shelob. All that stuff was as action-packed in the book as it was in the movie. And I had read those sequences before. So one thing is, in terms of just pure visceral action, it's got it. But in terms of language, now this is where Tolkien really shines because the whole mythos around Lord of the Rings is so extensive. He's written the Silmarillion and all these really complicated tomes. But what's interesting is he writes, he's invented languages, and on top of that, he writes a lot of songs, things that are in meter, things that are in rhyme, and a lot of the culture of the elves is you hear it in song, the kind of whole experience of their living is through song, which feels very folksy in that sense. And that is something that you never got in the film, that kind of folksy feeling, of okay, these people are living in the forest, this is actually their dwelling. They just seem like some kind of ethereal godlike creatures, which was great, don't get me wrong, but it was nothing like how it was compared. They seemed more down to earth in the book just for those simple elements that were there, that kind of authenticity. On top of that, there were whole sequences that were cut out or sort of reworked for the film. So, for example, Tom Bombadil, who's a very famous character who can wear the ring and nothing happens to him. He's one of the most intriguing characters in the whole book. And he's not even there, not even suggested. It's they probably feel whatever. It was a long enough film anyway. To include everything that's understandable, you have to cut out stuff like that. And it's precisely for reasons like that why the films are a lesser version of the books.
All right.
Naveen.
Cool. That's a lot of talking from Josh.
Let's hear your argument, man.
I think the reason why I hate the books is the very reason you spoke about all this while. In terms of it being all language and this and that, I'm I understand world building, okay? But I have passed that time in my life where I'll go and read something that is so intensive and I do not have that kind of inclination. Now, this is a very personal thing to say right now. But in terms of books also, there are so many books out there which have copied that Tolkien kind of world building thing and done better than that. So I think writing meter and rhyme, all that is not the only thing that he ever did. Everybody else.
He invented languages too.
So that a lot of people did as well. It's in Aragon as well. It's in Lord of the Rings as well.
It's in Star Trek.
It's in Game of Thrones as well. Exactly. So language building is not something new. Mankind since the dawn of time has been doing it. You know what I'm saying? So in terms of what the movies offer, is just so much of like a world building without having to like invest so much in that. You know what I'm saying? So the point being that, you know, in terms of all the extensive stuff you have to read along with the story, that can just take me away. And that happened with the first book, is when I first started reading it and I'm like, what the heck is happening? Because I could not invest myself into the book so much. Maybe I'm not into heavy set books. So in terms of that packaging, the movies offer so much. And I also watched the mini series that they launched, you know, like in the 80s, the animated one, and that kind of stayed with me when I was a kid. And then I watched the movies much later, and then I went back to the book. So in terms of what the world was to me, was already established. So now I wanted to see the story in its true sense of like how dark and how mythical it was. And that's why Peter Jackson brought the whole shebang, you know. So why would I ever go back to the books when I have that kind of visual storytelling in place?
Okay. George, when you watched the movie the first time, did you feel disappointed, or did you feel like this is not the same thing but it's still good?
So I thought it was a brilliant movie, man. I loved it. That whole sequence of the Balrog and all, epic shit. But and like I said, like in the books, for me, it's as good. But the thing is, there's always this thing about like everyone thinks that the book is always better than the film. So the rush to read the book was mainly to see like where it came from before the films would taint my vision so much. And I really think it was the best decision, man, because those books were like, they're just not what you would expect.
And I mean, you're saying you didn't need that much world building, you just wanted to get to the action faster?
Like, because see, Legolas does bad shit. And like, you know, for example, like he is shooting people while skateboarding down a staircase. Like, I mean, is that in the book? No. I don't think that's how they would intend to write it. But then in terms of what the character does, it's justified to me that he is this character. Now, they milked him too much in the Hobbit series. That is, again...
Yeah.
They are mistaken.
Ruined Legolas.
Ruined that.
Man.
Like, so I understand, like...
The movies ruined him.
Ruined him entirely.
Did the casting make a difference? Because if you read the books first and you had an imagination of what the characters look like, and then when you have real life people playing them in this mythical world, did that get you out of the the whole
Not
movie
really.
experience?
Honestly, like the whole visual style of the films is really good. But the thing is, Legolas just ended up being like a Rajnikant character by the end of the third film.
In what ways?
So,
in what ways?
Like taking down that big elephant.
Yeah, that is badass.
Exactly. So he's Rajnikant.
He's not like shooting one arrow and becomes 3 arrows and kills the elephant, right? He's legit like using physics and stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
on a real elephant. Where ghosts are fighting the army. You're using real
you're just
physics.
like picking on the whole mythos by yourself right now.
You just said real physics. Do you think it was real physics?
Yeah,
man?
if you
He's operating the
pulley
same
around
physics that
from, like-
Rajnikant uses.
No, that's not how it works.
Come on, man. You can't. This is not even a defensible point.
I will defend Legolas till I die. That's
he's-
how much I love him. Alright, so no.
Navin, when you read the books, was it because it was too long and too much? Like too tedious? Like, do you read Game of Thrones books or just watch the TV show?
So Game of Thrones again is a much better example of how you improve on that kind of world building skill, you know? Like now I have different perspectives of the stories from different characters, and there's like a world building in terms of how the character's world is. Instead of us being told that this is this and they have this myth and they are speaking this language.
That's not how it's written. That is a complete false. Just don't listen to what Naveen is saying.
That is how
that is a
it is.
lie he is currently propagating.
No.
So please don't believe that.
You have to like
It is
fucking-
absolutely not written like that.
It is like that.
No, it's not. He doesn't say this is the myth, this is that.
No, because he's telling one entire story in terms of one entire...
Gross misrepresentation.
You're just being like all rude right now.
I do want to talk
make my
about.
point.
I do want to talk about one thing that puts me off now about the Lord of the Rings series, and that's probably because
The book
like,
or the movies, you have to mention that.
the whole series, man,
Okay.
is that because Tolkien, and I don't want to be shaming Catholics out here, but his whole outlook is very sort of Catholic, and that reflects very
Yeah.
like there's hardly any women.
That was the point I was
There's
coming
all
to.
the dark and the
Yes.
light.
What was the other point you were coming to?
Yes,
Or did
I
he
was-
just bring up the point for you?
No, I was going to say that at the
He
end.
just gave him some arms.
lies, gross misrepresentation. Obviously.
I can also use big heavy words like that.
But
Vaginal
anyway,
cavity.
But what do you like? I would say like the books are still better than the films, but then just across the kind of thematically, like there's a lot of things I would disagree with.
So if you're
now.
recommending somebody who's new to this world completely, are you
I
telling
would-
them that you have to go for the book or the movie, and what is your defense? Like if, for example, me, I've not seen the movie or the books, that's not true. I've read and watched the movies. I'm saying if I hadn't, give me some defenses of one over the other. Let's start with Naveen now.
Watch the 80s miniseries first. That's what I did.
It is going to give me more work.
Yeah. Because then, like, you want to see the world, right? Then see that and then go to the movies directly. And then, like, you have the entire thing. I enjoyed this comparing them only. Like, I know why I spend time reading the book and comparing that when I can just have two visual storytelling.
Is it because you watched the movie first?
Yeah. I
So
watched
that
the entire
makes the
series.
difference.
I watched the entire series over one night and I watched it again.
So maybe that's what made the difference, right? If you had read the book first, maybe you would either be completely uninterested in the
No, I
series
know
entirely.
myself. I know myself.
So this is the
Enough
hard
to
part,
know.
like, because I think a lot of people, their jumping off point was the first film. So everybody kind of started in, at least mine, a lot of people I've spoken with.
What I was saying is, like, at the end of it, I'm saying what I know about myself, and a lot of my fellow friends are like me only, who do not have this kind of tenacity to read so much after a while. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It just comes down to, like, you basically reading certain stuff that has one kind of arc and then moving on.
But I'm not arguing whether, like, if people don't want to read a book, I can't force them to read. Or if they don't like to read books generally. But people who would read a book versus watching a film, I would say
Something
read the book first.
as intensive as
In
Lord of the
this
Rings
case.
needs a lot of inclination towards spending so much time in that world. So what
Because it's a big book, man.
Yeah, so my point at the end
It's
is
3 films. Even if you had to watch the films, it would take a long time.
so 9 hours of spending watching a series of
That's
movies.
9 whole hours,
That's
man.
a long time.
So that's good enough in terms of like 90 hours reading the book.
So your argument is time-based now.
Yeah. That was my whole
Instead
argument
of
from
writing
the
based or like text based is now,
Yeah.
I don't have that much
start. So I
time.
made all my points and then
I
I'm
want to
saying this.
rebut your one point about the skills that Tolkien has employed. Like, as much as in fantasy fiction they do employ these things and everyone does it differently, that's the whole point. They do it differently. You're not saying, like, you can't debunk that by saying everybody does it, that's why it's not that
No, I'm not
great.
debunking
I'm
it.
not saying it's unique, man. I'm not saying Tolkien is unique in this respect. I'm saying the way he has built the world, he's used all these tools and he's done it well, man. That's what I'm saying.
Cool. That I can give you. I don't know. I don't have a defense against that.
Yeah, unless your defense was lots of people make movies. What's the big deal?
Yeah, but no one will
Exactly.
actually
Lots of
build
people
a
write jokes.
Hobbit
What's the
village in
big
New
deal?
Zealand and shoot over
Personal
there,
stuff.
and nobody else will cast Benedict Cumberbatch as a dragon ever.
Yeah. Hobbit, oh my god, that's another debate altogether.
Yeah, next time on IVM Fights.
All right, so we don't have a conclusion because the books are good if you like reading and enjoy this kind of world building, and the movies are good if you hate reading.
And like Legolas.
Yeah, if you've got not enough time, if you're living life in the fast lane and are not able to
Yeah,
read
that's true.
books.
If you have too many things to do.
That was
you know.
Orlando Bloom at his peak, man.
Rajnikant peak, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, if you guys have an opinion on Lord of the Rings, books versus movies, let us know. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're IVM Podcasts and our website is ivmpodcast.com. Say hi, guys.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Sorry to say, but there's been a slight delay due to the apocalypse having suddenly begun. As you can see, there's death, destruction, and chaos taking place all around us. But don't you worry, food and drinks will be served shortly, and I would recommend checking out IVM Podcasts to get some of your favorite Indian podcasts. We'll keep you going till this whole thing blows over. Thank you.